tell you things are not looking good. You guys know Erica Campbell just got the horrible news of her life. And sometimes I be getting these girls confused, Erica and Tina Campbell, okay? You guys know they're sisters. One is, married. The other one just got a divorce because her husband said that he cannot take it anymore. Well, guess what? I came here because I got an update for you guys. And they're saying they found that he is dealing with another woman already, like in a serious situation. People are claiming the mistress is a Caucasian lady. I don't know. I came across this video and I know you guys love to react to these. So let's react and let's see what's really going on in these streets, because I heard he was gay. Yeah, they said he was cheating with men too, but why didn't Jesus tell her what was going on? Jesus is all knowing. So why didn't God let her know? Because she's supposed to be so holy and close to God. And I think she knew all this and she just ignored, and she just did what she wanted to do. She wasn't on God. She wasn't listening to God, because God would not lead you to a man like this or to destruction. So comment,
After more than 25 years of marriage, gospel star, who many of you may know as Mary, Tina Campbell and her husband, Teddy Campbell, are calling it quits. Even after everything they've publicly worked through, including infidelity and rebuilding their relationship. Now, a love story.
Hung up the phone, so I had my answer. So it broke my heart. It devastated me.
That you want to apply your faith to the situation. Then apply your faith.
Since then, I found out about more. And I don't want to hold on to somebody who I cannot trust. I never cheated in my head. I never did anything. I was 190% committed to that man.
They had once stood in front of thousands of people, holding hands, singing about faith, loyalty, and forever. Cameras had captured their smiles, their prayers, their powerful chemistry. To the world, Tina Campbell and Teddy Campbell had looked unbreakable. They had been seen as the gold standard of love in gospel music. Fans had admired them, couples had looked up to them, and churches had celebrated them as proof that faith-based marriages could survive anything. But behind that glowing image, something had slowly started shifting. And almost no one had realized it at the beginning. You won't believe how small the first signs had been. It had not begun with shouting or dramatic scenes. It had started quietly. Teddy had become more distant. His phone had suddenly turned into a private zone. Calls had been answered in low tones or in different rooms, late-night studio sessions had increased, and travel plans had become more frequent. At first, it had seemed normal because their careers had always demanded time and movement. But this time, something had felt different. His explanations had been shorter, his patience had been thinner, simple questions had started feeling like attacks to him. This is where it gets interesting, because nothing had looked wrong on the surface, yet everything had felt off underneath.
How Christian women, but Christian women stick through and hold on during sins that even God said, if this happens, I'm giving you an out. You cheated on this lady. You had a child. Like, you cheated multiple times, and then you're going to have the nerve to divorce her? Yes, please.
Tina had tried to ignore the discomfort. She had told herself that stress could change a person. She had blamed busy schedules. She had even wondered if she had been overthinking. Let me tell you, when doubt enters slowly, it does not scream, it whispers. And those whispers had followed her everywhere, during family dinners, during rehearsals, even during prayers. She had looked at him and still seen her husband, but she had also felt like a stranger was slowly replacing him. Publicly, they had continued appearing together. On stage, they had performed like nothing had changed. Interviews had shown unity. Social media had displayed family pictures and strong messages about commitment. But fans had sharp eyes. Some had noticed that their body language had shifted slightly. The laughter had seemed rehearsed at times. Eye contact had not lasted as long. Small details had raised quiet questions online. But here is the shocking part. There had been no official drama, no headlines yet. Everything had still been under control. At home, tension had grown thicker. Whenever Tina had gently brought up her feelings, Teddy had denied everything. He had said she was imagining problems. He had told her she needed to trust him more. Over time, she had started questioning herself. Was she insecure? Was she creating issues that did not exist? The craziest part was that some days he had acted perfectly normal, affectionate, calm, supportive. Those normal days had confused her even more. If something had truly been wrong, why had he seemed fine sometimes? Weeks had turned into months. The emotional distance had widened. He had guarded his phone like it held secrets that could not be seen. Notifications had been turned off. Passwords had changed. Travel details had become unclear. Yet there had still been no proof. And without proof, confrontation had felt dangerous. Accusing him without evidence could have destroyed their marriage and their public image. That fear had kept her silent longer than she had wanted. Their situation had been complicated by their status. They had not just been a married couple. They had been leaders in gospel music. People had looked at them for inspiration. If cracks had appeared publicly, it would not just have been personal pain, it would have been public humiliation. Destiny took an unexpected turn when someone very close to Tina had started noticing the same warning signs. This friend had seen the sadness behind her strength. She had sensed the confusion Tina had tried to hide. Instead of giving emotional advice, that friend had quietly started paying attention. Schedules had been compared, travel dates had been checked against official bookings, small inconsistencies had begun to appear, certain trips had not matched the events he had claimed to attend, certain calls had repeated at strange hours, patterns had slowly started forming. Yep, you heard that right. It had not been one strange moment. It had been a series of small, connected details. Still, nothing had exploded yet. There had been suspicion, not confirmation. Tina had remained hopeful that it was all a misunderstanding. She had prayed harder, she had tried to act normal, but inside, the doubt had grown stronger. One particular timeline mismatch had finally stood out in a way that could not be ignored. A location had not matched his explanation at all. That single detail had shaken her deeply. It had been the first time suspicion had started turning into quiet investigation. And just when she had been hoping the feeling would fade away, more hidden pieces had started surfacing behind the scenes. What had seemed like small cracks were slowly preparing to break the entire foundation. What happened next would not only challenge trust, it would completely change how she saw the man she had loved for years. As doubt slowly turned into silent checking, the atmosphere around Tina had started to feel heavier. She had not confronted Teddy again immediately. Instead, she had chosen to observe. Her trusted friend had continued comparing schedules and tracking patterns without making noise. What had first looked like random coincidences had slowly started forming a clear picture. Certain trips had overlapped with unknown numbers calling repeatedly. Some hotel stays had not matched any official event. The more they had looked, the more questions had appeared, and this was where it started becoming impossible to ignore. The investigation had not been dramatic or loud. It had been careful and patient. Travel dates had been checked city by city. Public appearances had been verified. There had been nights when Teddy had claimed to be working late, but no studio had confirmed his presence. Small financial details had also started raising eyebrows. Charges had appeared in places that had nothing to do with ministry or music. At first, Tina had refused to believe what those signs were pointing toward. She had wanted another explanation. But every new detail had removed one more excuse. Let me tell you, the hardest part had not been the evidence itself. It had been the waiting. Tina had been living in two realities at once. In one reality, she had still been a wife hoping her marriage was safe. In the other, she had been slowly accepting that something serious had been hidden for a long time. The friend had gathered screenshots, timelines, and confirmations quietly. This had not been about jealousy. It had been about truth. Then, one day, a major detail had surfaced. A trip that Teddy had described as ministry work had completely fallen apart under simple checking. The location had not matched, the event had never happened, and the person he had supposedly met had denied any meeting. That was the moment when suspicion had officially turned into certainty. You won't believe how quickly everything had started connecting after that. Once one lie had been confirmed, other pieces had lined up behind it. Patterns had shown repeated visits to specific cities where there had been no professional reason to travel. Calls from certain numbers had increased before and after those trips. Messages had been deleted, but call records had still told their own story. Yep, you heard that right. Even erased conversations had left shadows behind, and those shadows had started revealing a double life that had been carefully managed for years. When Tina had finally seen the collected proof laid out in front of her, silence had filled the room. It had not been loud anger at first. It had been shock. Dates, times, places, they had all been there. Not one random mistake. Not one single slip. This had been organized. This is how the illusion had started breaking. What had once looked like stress or distance had now revealed a pattern of repeated betrayal. The scale had been more painful than the idea itself. It had not been one woman. It had been multiple connections across different places. The timelines had overlapped. While Tina had been performing on stage preaching about loyalty, Teddy had allegedly been living another reality in secret. But here is the shocking part. Even with all that evidence, confronting him had still felt terrifying. Because once truth had been spoken out loud, nothing could ever return to normal. Tina had struggled internally for days before facing him. She had replayed the facts again and again, hoping to find a mistake in the evidence. She had prayed for clarity. She had cried in private. The emotional weight had been overwhelming. This had not just been about cheating. It had been about years of trust, shared memories, children, ministry, and public respect. Everything had been connected. Finally, she had chosen a moment when they were alone. The confrontation had not started with shouting. It had started calmly. She had presented small details first, watching his reaction. At first, he had denied everything. His face had remained steady. His tone had been controlled. He had called the claims ridiculous. He had said people were trying to create drama. The craziest part was how confident he had seemed in that denial. But as she had placed more evidence in front of him, timelines, confirmations, inconsistencies, his responses had started slowing down. Silence had replaced quick answers. Eye contact had faded. The wall of confidence had begun to crack. Destiny took an unexpected turn in that moment because the denial could not survive the facts anymore. The truth had been standing in the room between them. The air had felt heavy. Every second had stretched longer than usual. Tina had waited for honesty, but what came next would shake her even deeper. Because admission was only the beginning. The real impact of what he had been hiding was still about to surface, and when it did, it would not just damage trust. It would completely break her sense of reality. When the denial finally began to fall apart, the room had gone painfully quiet. Teddy had stopped arguing. His voice had lowered. The confidence he had shown at the start of the confrontation had slowly faded. Tina had stood there holding evidence in her hands, but what she had really been holding was the collapse of everything she had believed in. For a few long moments, he had said nothing. And sometimes, silence had spoken louder than any confession ever could. Then came partial admission. Not everything at once, not full honesty, just pieces. He had admitted to mistakes. He had tried to reduce the damage with softer words, but the details in front of them had not matched small mistakes. They had revealed repeated choices, multiple women, different cities, a timeline that had stretched much longer than Tina had imagined. You won't believe how heavy that realization had felt. It had not been one bad decision. It had been a pattern that had lasted for years. As more truth had surfaced, the emotional impact had become unbearable. Tina had felt like the ground under her feet had disappeared. Every memory had started replaying in her mind. Anniversaries, family vacations, church services where they had prayed together. She had begun questioning which moments had been real and which had been acting. This is where it gets interesting in the most painful way, because betrayal does not just hurt the present, it rewrites the past. Teddy had eventually admitted that he had been living a double life. He had confessed that what started as one connection had turned into multiple affairs over time. He had hidden it carefully. He had managed schedules. He had created excuses. The craziest part was how normal he had appeared while carrying all those secrets. He had looked into her eyes every day knowing what he was hiding. That truth had cut deeper than anything else. Tina's reaction had not been calm anymore. Shock had turned into anger. Anger had turned into heartbreak. She had cried in a way she never had before. Not just tears, but deep, painful sobs that came from confusion and disbelief. Let me tell you, it had not been only about infidelity. It had been about humiliation, about feeling replaced, about questioning her worth. She had asked herself how she had missed the signs. She had blamed herself for trusting too easily. The confrontation had lasted hours. Questions had poured out one after another. How long? Why? With who? Were there feelings involved? Each answer had felt like another blow. Some responses had been incomplete. Some had been painful truths. But here is the shocking part. Even during confession, there had still been moments where he had tried to justify his behavior. Stress, temptation, weakness. Those explanations had sounded empty in front of the damage already done. Outside their home, rumors had slowly started spreading. The industry had sensed something was wrong. Close insiders had begun whispering. The perfect image that Tina and Teddy Campbell had built over decades had started cracking publicly. Fans had noticed tension. Media outlets had begun speculating. What makes this situation different was that they had not been just celebrities, they had been symbols of faith. That had made the fall even louder. Tina had entered a dark emotional space after the confession. Sleep had become difficult. Trust had completely shattered. She had described feeling like she was living with a stranger. Every time she had looked at him, she had not seen her husband. She had seen the lies. She had seen the hidden messages and secret meetings playing in her mind. Destiny took an unexpected turn because now the choice in front of her had not been simple. It had not been just about leaving or staying. It had been about surviving emotionally. There had been moments when her anger had felt uncontrollable. She had admitted later that she had wanted to destroy everything connected to him, not because she was cruel, but because the pain had been overwhelming. Yep, you heard that right. Even someone known for faith and strength had reached a breaking point. Her belief system had been shaken. She had asked God hard questions. She had struggled with forgiveness even as the world expected her to preach about it. Meanwhile, Teddy had faced the weight of exposure. His reputation had suffered. The image of a devoted husband had been replaced with headlines about betrayal. He had watched the woman he loved break down in front of him, knowing he had caused it. But even that realization had not fixed the damage immediately. Trust once broken does not repair overnight. As days passed, the pressure had grown heavier. Family members had been affected. Children had sensed tension. The ministry they had built together had stood at risk. Everyone had been waiting for one major decision. Would Tina walk away, or would she attempt something no one expected? And just when the public had assumed divorce was coming next, Tina had started thinking in a direction that surprised even those closest to her. The choice she was about to make would shock the industry even more than the scandal itself. When the world had expected an official separation announcement, Tina had shocked everyone by not making one immediately. After everything that had come out, the admissions, the humiliation, the emotional collapse, divorce had seemed almost certain. Headlines had predicted it. Fans had debated it nonstop. Even people close to them had quietly prepared for that ending. But instead of giving the public a clear answer, Tina had stepped back into silence. And that silence had created even more tension. She had tried to fight for the marriage, but fighting had not looked romantic. It had looked exhausting. Therapy sessions had begun, but they had not magically fixed anything. Conversations had often reopened wounds instead of closing them. Every time trust had seemed to rebuild a little, a memory had dragged it backward. A late reply, a changed tone, a simple notification sound. You won't believe how fragile everything had felt. Healing had not been steady. It had been messy and unpredictable. Teddy had promised change. He had offered access, transparency, and apologies. He had admitted his failures publicly. But here is the shocking part. Apologies had not erased images from Tina's mind. Confession had not removed the scenes she imagined during those hidden years. She had struggled with anger that returned without warning. Some nights had been calm. Other nights had been filled with questions that had no satisfying answers. Publicly, they had tried to show effort. They had spoken about counseling. They had discussed accountability. Yep, you heard that right. They had tried to turn pain into a lesson. But behind closed doors, the emotional weight had still been heavy. Forgiveness had not been a single decision. It had been a daily battle. And some days, that battle had felt impossible to win. The pressure of being spiritual leaders had made everything harder. People had expected strength. They had expected grace. They had expected a perfect example of redemption. What makes this situation different was that Tina had not just been dealing with betrayal, she had been dealing with public expectations at the same time. Every move had been judged, every appearance had been analyzed, even silence had been questioned. There had been moments when she had doubted her decision to stay. Destiny took an unexpected turn, not because everything improved, but because she realized the damage might never fully disappear. Trust had changed its shape. It had become cautious, guarded, watchful. The innocence of their early years had been gone. No therapy session could bring that version of their relationship back. Teddy had tried to prove himself, but rebuilding respect had been slower than losing it. Invitations had reduced. Whispers in the industry had continued. The image of a flawless couple had permanently cracked. Let me tell you, surviving a scandal had not meant escaping its shadow. The past had followed them into every new step. Even when they had stood together again publicly, something had felt different. Not broken beyond function, but no longer pure. Smiles had returned, but they had carried history behind them. The craziest part was that sometimes the relationship had seemed stable on the outside, while tension quietly remained underneath. Stability had not meant peace. In the end, there had been no fairy tale recovery. There had been effort, there had been struggle, there had been moments of connection and moments of deep doubt. Tina had grown stronger individually, but the marriage had carried permanent marks. Some wounds had closed, but scars had stayed visible. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think a marriage can really survive something this deep? Can trust ever return to what it was before, or does it always stay fragile? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have an honest conversation about loyalty, forgiveness, and consequences. If you found this breakdown powerful, Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. Your support keeps these real conversations going.